Hello, thank you for downloading, watching, and listening to the Lean Into Artcast, a show where a couple of visual storytellers get together, take on various topics that pop up when you choose a life of communicating visually. We think hard about this stuff, so you will too. My name is Jerzy Drozd. I'm a cartoonist and a teaching artist. The other host is...
Hi, I am Rob Stenzinger. I'm a user experience and game designer. It's
good to see you again, Rob.
It's great to see you.
Twice in 1 week. What
I
a
know.
Treat.
Like our main show 2 times in 1 week, and I know, of course, you're delighted. I have to admit, I'm delighted too. Right. That's an I am delightful joke, but anyway.
Yeah. So what are we talking about this episode? I was gonna say this week, but this episode we already talked on Monday, but
yeah, that was a time shifted thing where it was the whole right. Yep, we were rolling with an event kind of thing, and. Okay, so but here we're back. We're talking about some tools and thoughts around updating your portfolio. That I don't know. That can be. We've hit this topic from a few different angles. I think directly talking about portfolios. And did we have Krishna Sadasavam on as a guest for that one?
I believe we did. It was a while ago. It's been a long time since we've touched on this topic, and
yeah.
I know it's timely for me. So you put in the notes proposing that we pick apart one of our sites, and I'm going to suggest that we use yours, reason being that I know you've put some cycles into this, whereas I have not yet. So I am looking forward to showing up with beginner's mind and inquisitive mind to pepper you with questions about things that you've been thinking about on this.
Okay. It's so funny. One of the a device that I don't know why I like it so much. I think it's because it was like a delightful shock. So like when I was a kid watching a cooking show, right? And you see the host like putting in all this effort into a cake, and then they put it into an oven, right? And then like maybe say a few other words, and then open another oven, and boom, pull out a finished cake, right? I was like, wait a minute. Whoa, that was a second oven. Nice. I thought whatever. If it came up naturally, I would be open to that, where it's like, yours is the early, the one that you're putting the ingredients together. And maybe mine's the finished cake. I don't know.
Oh, that would be cute. Yes. Sorry I blew that.
Nah, but we've got a lot of ground to cover. So who knows as far as what all we'll end up being able to get through, because we like to really I explore our thoughts along the way, and that's part of the point. And this is like portfolios, they can take so many forms, right? Where you've got you can essentially just have your just you and your main contact info, like a business card, but then it sort of ramps up from there as far as how much evidence are you going to put out and or pitch and storytell related to what you do. And then all the way up to stuff like here's some kind of curated history of stuff I've done, and I think that that applies to a lot of, especially folks who would people like us who are visual storytellers, where they're having something out there it's helpful for as a follow-up, where someone becomes aware of you and they want to dig into that a little bit. And anyway, we'll explore like that kind of thought process. And I don't know, like I'm excited you offered the as far as picking mine to explore, because I welcome it. I'm really curious about your reactions and thoughts, and even if it generates a lot of stuff I need to do as follow-up, it'll be worth it.
Me too. All right. Well, with that, how about want to hear the transition music? Yeah?
Yeah? I'm not hearing anything.
Okay. You don't hear anything? Oh, let me play it then.
What? All right, fine.
All right.
Trying to make it more elaborate. All right.
So that means we are now officially into the on the ground part of the show. So where do we start, Rob?
Well, I think you have well my portfolio up on the screen. It's one of those things where we'll go more into the thoughts about this later on, but it had been almost 2 years, somewhere in that range, since I'd really done some serious updating, and um, there's bound to be things that go stale in that amount of time, and new examples, new cakes that were baked, if you will, to put into the show, and so it was time. And this so what you're seeing right now is this sort of this general pattern that I have, where there's navigation at the top, there's a splash image, meant to be fun, and uh, just the flavor of my my humor in a way. And then there's a section on top that sort of describes the collection of stuff you might be looking at, and then there's a collection of stuff, and then there's the footer, right? So, and the footer is like a place where you can um a place of calls to action, things to do, interactions, underneath the banner of like, I hope when someone chooses to go to my portfolio, that it's providing easy ways for for them to answer questions and then act upon what they were curious about in the first place. So this the landing page for me isn't where you get straight into like work examples or whatnot. I decided to make my landing page sort of that signpost that's like, here's a generally useful thing to be like, oh, what this guy, what's he up to? And and I'm answering that. So there you go. I'm curious, Jerzy, what are some things um that you're noticing or reacting to as you're
Um, well, there's these three blocks of text,
hmm
right? It's like, first of all, I'm noticing that I have to like scroll for quite a bit to get
hmm
past this image, which is a delightful image, but it's like I have to go like, okay, Rob Senzinger, cute dog on a weird quad runner.
hmm
Then I scrolled to find out user experience and games design. Was that intentional? Was you trying to create like that purposeful pause there with like a Rob Senzinger? Then user experience and game designer, coder, facilitator.
hmm
And then we get these three blocks: what I do, what I believe about design, and why this calls to me.
hmm
Um, so nice 1, 2, 3. You know, well, he's a user experience and games designer. What does that mean? Well, this is specifically what it means. And then we get into what your philosophy is and why you're drawn to it. So we get a sense of who you are. And there's all these blocks of projects with like a nice tile followed by a description of each one. And it's not until we get to the very bottom that it says send me an email. That I'm noticing.
Yeah. So all right. Well, so notice so part of it would be, I suppose, putting on a hat of like, which of those types of folks that this site is meant to serve would you be? So I'm honestly, you're already a collaborator, but you kind of
Mm-hmm.
fall into the collaborator category. Um,
Mm-hmm. But if I
so
was somebody who's looking for a game designer to work on a small games project, right?
sure, yeah.
Because we've got game designer right there, second one on the list. Well, no, first one. It's coupled with user experience and games designer.
hmm
Okay. Well, I'm a game designer. What kind of games does this guy do? I use creative, collaborative, human-centered tools of user experience and design to investigate ideas, build projects, and teach teams. I often find useful ways to combine research, design, prototyping, games, and storytelling to serve the teams I work with. So, okay, well, that doesn't tell me what kind of games you make. Ah, here we go. Projects. Now we get into the, let's see, does a podcast. Advanced Development Group for Target Product Design and Development. Well, that's not a game. Guitar Fighter. Here we go. We got a game. And video game construction kit.
hmm
So now I'm play acting here, right? I'm doing that role playing, that persona
hmm
inhabiting. So there's these two things here I could try. Ah, he's on Android and iOS, and he teaches how to make games. So now I'm assuming that this guy is able. I'm able to have a conversation with him about some of the more abstract ideas about my game. Maybe he can
hmm
help facilitate some of the aspects that I don't quite understand just yet.
I like that exercise, and you can do that exercise for essentially the like what are the different signals. Using this portfolio as an example and a thought experiment. Like, what are the kinds of services? Like, what are the shingles you're putting out there? Where here's your virtual shop in the world. What are you putting out there as far as an approachable set of services and this and stuff to like reinforce that and send a signal that's like, okay, great, you say games and here's games, and or you say design and here's design. And then I happen to like, so that list of titles that I gave to clarify what I offer. the these detailed examples are meant to provide ways to reinforce that. um, and yeah, that's the and that overall pattern, as we were scrolling through this initially, that's the pattern I happen to follow for what works for my portfolio, right?
Okay.
I think if you have 1 to 5, 6, whatever amount of things that you're trying to put out into the world, like these are my different services I offer, you're going to have I think different needs. And the and I find myself like some of the inspiration too, where it's like putting some philosophy and a little bit about who I am. That was one of the things I was trying to fix from the prior version of the portfolio, because it was mostly about which isn't bad, but it was it felt incomplete to me to essentially have the examples and not a lot of story around the examples,
Mm-hmm.
especially because for in my case, I am looking to weave a story that finds this reinforcing overlap across a few different disciplines. So in a way, I'm sharing that belief along with, or like sort of imbued with inside the examples.
Question though, I
Yes.
don't think this would run against the grain that you're describing. But I'm curious, in that thought experiment that I went through, where I was scrolling through your portfolio, and we get to projects, and I'm pretending to be a person who wants to hire a game designer, and I'm like, okay, it says right there, experience in games designer. What I do, okay, I'm reading that, and that's philosophy stuff. But what games has he made? And it took me like another couple seconds to get to the games. What would happen? And I'm not suggesting that you do this. I'm just asking you to react to this proposal as I think about my own portfolio as somebody who's a cartoonist and teaching artist, two related but different things. Um, what would happen if you used the same approach but had it chunked into 3 areas that would be tagged so you could just jump to them, right? Where it's like that same narrative is just surrounded. Here's just the game design projects, right?
Yeah, I think that's a really great idea. This is one thing that I intend to do as an update to this site, is somewhere in that top section. So if we scroll up a little bit,
Go back to it.
near the not the very top, but the sort of the where it describes the philosophy and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
The more so that descriptive section, I would like to put some kind of filtering navigation mechanism. So it's like, if you're into the narrative and you want to explore the copy and dive into that, that's great. But if you want to just sort of filter through these quick examples, it's almost like navigating through lots of, if you have a big list of anything, right? Files or music in your library or whatever. You want to, just skip along genres or something, right?
Right,
So
right.
those disciplines are exactly what I would use as like the key areas of concern to quickly filter the examples. And this page has that issue to a mild extent compared to the other pages. The other pages, it gets worse as far as the amount of work it takes to sift through all the stuff. So
Mm.
definitely on my list to improve and refine. So yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, I was thinking about how on my own website, um, having a block for like basically have cartoons and teaching artists doing essentially what you've done, where it's like I'm going to put some narrative around who I am as a person, and what kind of, like, giving them a flavor of what my personal presence is like. But then have two discrete chunks that maybe are even on the same page, but you can just like do a jump, like even an old fashioned HTML anchor tag. Go here to see my teaching stuff. Go here to see my comics work. Right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And as far as, getting into the mechanics of how you would do that, because you have, the content design and your user experience design, and how you define essentially your goals, and then the even if it's hypothetical, or as concrete as you can get, like, or the goals and needs and behaviors of your audience that's coming to this. That's a really handy exercise. And then you land upon needs like that, where like there's got to be some way to quickly filter or jump around. And then by being thoughtful about how you create your content, you can make that an easier system to implement. And then, like, for in my case, this is it's like those content objects become something that I can manage, and it's sort of how and like what I need to put into to create them, and then what I am going to do as far as how I present them, and then make them interactive and stuff. So this is so we could get into some of the mechanics if you're interested in that, as far as
I am.
Okay.
Are we talking about technologies and tools now?
Yeah, that'd be great. Because this, all the planning and sort of the conceptual design things that we're hinting at, we'll talk more about in the next half of the show. They're like when I'm actually building it out, right? It's like I've got my roadmap, I've got my plan, and now I'm needing to actually do the writing and find out, like, let's see, how much content makes sense to do these different jobs, and all that. It's like, I'm using things like, honestly, Google Docs was a huge tool. So it's super basic and seems simple, but like being able to put all this, there is a fair amount of writing, like both in the heading sections, and then in those detail elements, and then being able to easily get feedback and editorial comments. That was immensely helpful. And if you have all that content embedded in, like, it's in HTML, or it's in a database or a spreadsheet or what have you, actually Google Sheets isn't a bad place to collaborate on content either. But you're getting it in somewhere where you can get that feedback on it is pretty handy. But then, and so that's kind of an obvious one, but worth noting. Another tool I used a good bit of was the Sketch app.
Let me pull that up. What's the Sketch app? I heard about this recently from somebody. Who was telling me about this? Oh, I think actually it was Mushin Girl was telling me about this during a live stream I was doing, I think. Okay.
Yeah, it's cool. It's a really handy tool that is it's essentially a different take on Adobe Illustrator. And then but it's not as Adobe complex in the UI. It offers some advanced tools and whatnot too if you dig into it. But by default, you're really set up with a lot of let's see, artboards, right? So like an artboard is like a region in this bigger document that it's going to put out a separate file for every single artboard you're working with. And you can totally do this in Adobe Illustrator and whatnot, but there's I guess the focus and the behaviors of SketchUp I find very approachable, and it integrates with, depending on what you're doing. If you can do like a variety of illustrative tasks with it, But like one of its huge strengths is like, layout and for mobile and web development in doing visual design work. And it even integrates with tools as far as making those things into like clickable prototypes and whatnot. If you're looking to sort of do some, get some usability testing of, the basic navigability of what you're putting together, it's pretty neat. But in my case, I found it handy just as far as like it's easy drag and drop, and just, I don't know, I can't tell you like this is totally what you need to use instead of Inkscape or Illustrator or whatever. It just happened to be helpful for me because I was able to, I had a lot of work that was just in sort of this cropped square that I knew I was going to use for my visual examples when you're navigating it in a collection. I had that part of my design, but then I also had the large examples as well. So SketchUp made it easy where, maybe I would use the same visual asset in both, and I would just be able to clone it and drop it in one and get it to, scale it to be a good aspect ratio, or zoom in on a region where, easily make it the thumbnail version in the full size. Very helpful.
So what kind of file is exported out of this app when you're done prototyping?
That's the other thing too. Like, so like getting it to like just sort of generate all sorts of assets. It has neat behaviors, right? Where you can select any of the artboards, and then you can click on this thing in the right column near the bottom called Make Exportable. And then you get to select, well, I want you to export this as a PNG, but at double size, right? Or I want you to export this as a JPEG or a PDF or an SVG. So
okay, so this isn't the same thing as like Dreamweaver where you're exporting like a bunch of assets and the corresponding HTML or CSS. Okay.
Yeah, so I'm doing a little bit of I'm knitting together all this stuff in HTML with something with actual just HTML that's generated through this tool called Harp.js. And yeah, so you can think of this as like, well, the raw content, you've got the text in Google Docs, you got the images in Sketch, a couple helpful apps like Sketch, where Sketch is this free tool from Evernote that lets you, for me, I needed to use it to redact stuff. So I wanted to share examples of things that it just, you can be in a situation where, you need to share some visual examples of your work, but it's work that has private aspects to it in some ways. Mm-hmm. And yeah, so Sketch, it has a super easy redacting selector where you just select it and it sort of garbles. The rectangle just turns to garble as you select it. Oh, nice. Pretty neat.
Sketch has been around forever.
Yeah.
Like 10 years or more, I think, right?
Yeah, it was a standalone thing until I think Evernote bought them. And
you're right, yeah.
And even that was, many years ago.
Yeah.
But then the trick as far as like, I also was operating in this way because I knew that the target for like the output I was creating, I had essentially I had a sort of a simple template that I worked out using this tech stack dictated by Harp.js, and this is one of those tools that helps with generating websites. So let's say you've got some content that's like data, right? Where you've got essentially maybe a list of pages and then some links you want to appear on different pages, or maybe there's sections or blurbs or however you think of it. But you've got your structured data, and then you've got your template, and then you've got how you want it to be styled, right? So you've got your traditional HTML, CSS stuff, and of course this overall layout structure of your site. And much like if you've ever done work with like WordPress templates or any kind of like web system template, it's a bit like that, but more, I think, streamlined, not as complex. It's been a while since I've updated a WordPress template, so maybe that's gotten easier in recent times. But you basically have a these things, and then Harp lets you work on it in two different circumstances. Where one, it's like it runs as a web server in on your machine while you're tweaking stuff. You're like, oh, I would like this bigger, and I would like to have a new type of content section or whatever, and that's going to be in the in these templates. That in my case, I was using a template language called Jade, which I think recently got renamed to Pug because of a trademark battle. But it's so there you go. So hold on. So Jade, you're scrolling right there. This is what a Jade template looks like.
Okay.
And so you have the semantic structure of your document. Think of a document as an outline, right? Where it's like your pages have a main heading that's going to be an H1. And then you may have some details within the H1, or you may now, that's just, okay, here's the overall title of this page. And then I'm going to go into my next detailed sections, which are going to be H2s. And then below my H2s, I'm going to have some other content that, and what this is, it creates this sort of this hierarchy to your document. And thinking that way in how you present your documents can help you. Thinking structured is going to be helpful for you to find those regular patterns in your in your content, and that will help you structure what kind of data you want to set up. Like in this example of the structured data on the left side of the example you have pulled up. It's someone wants to make a list of people on a team, right? And so in your structured data, you have a section called team, and then a title in there, and then the actual content of the title, and then you have members, and then the actual list of members, right? And that's all. And so JSON, this is where it gets, if you're into coding, awesome. And if you're not, you're probably going to want to find a different path for this. But let's see, there's kind of a payoff where working in this way, it's, if you are comfortable with saying like, oh yeah, I see how my document, if it does have these patterns, and I'm willing to put it in these structured sections, and then I'm willing to, and think of it that way, and then in the end, put it inside this thing called a JSON file, right? Which is essentially like a data, just it's JavaScript data, right? There's no code flow in there. It's not like using objects or functions or anything like that. It's just pure data, which is essentially very values such as strings and lists, and well, actually strings and lists and objects, but they're data objects, not like a class with behaviors and stuff on it. So
right, like it's not formatting objects. It's not like we'll put a frame around this, change this color to that, make this 17-point type. This is the simple data of like what is the type going to say, right? Okay.
And it's just, that's your pure content, and now you take your pure content in a structured way, and then you have a template, and because you've separated that, it's an interesting power that I guess if you're into this, you're going to find it worthwhile. Where if I want to change how my portfolio is laid out, I can just go to my template and make a small change. Boom. It's all laid out differently. I don't have to go to every page and make all these discrete changes. If I want to make a change to like how all the different sections are, maybe I want to make a progressive disclosure feature where I'm like, you know what, some of these paragraphs are long. Instead of making my, a visitor to my site scroll so much, I bet I could scrunch that up a bit, and I could add essentially like a little more link, and then that more link. And so all that more link is this thing I could code in the, let's say I probably would use, I offhand, I would use CSS and JavaScript to do that and have just essentially a standard height and whatever. But I can edit this in my templates, and I don't have to like try to change my, I don't have to go in and manually code HTML in all these different sections. That's the idea.
And I've probably said this before, but this is not dissimilar for those who have done any work in publishing than style sheets. Like style sheets behave exactly the same way, right? There's the content of your book, and then the style sheet you modify, and it just like propagates and alters the content of the book.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's if you have comfort in thinking in that way, and or just a curiosity to explore it. This is Harp.js, it's free and open source, and it has some nice helpful documentation and patterns, right? So like if you're exploring and things aren't working, that's all right. Harp.js is just running in the background, and you make a change to your template, and then go refresh your browser, and it's just going to keep letting you do this feedback loop of experiment and test. Or let's say you start you go into your JSON file that has the content for the text of all of your portfolio, and you add another section, and now you just refresh the page in your web browser, and it's generated, because so you've created this ability to easily generate and display and style content separate from the content.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so that's let's see, and yeah, you end up in your normal web development kind of loop there. I'm debating. I could. I didn't get super ready for this, but I could do a little bit of screen share if you want to see the structure of any of these pages, or I don't know. What do you think, Jerzy? You want to dig in a little deeper? Maybe.
Well, I was about to like sound the bell saying that it's almost break time.
Okay.
So if you want to do a quick demo of that before we go to the break, that can be the way we close out this section.
All right. Because it'd be only for the video. All right, maybe that's an exercise for another time.
Okay.
Because I think the examples that are listed on the harpjs.com website are really good, really good sample. And it's just you'd be applying those same concepts to content for your portfolio.
Do you want to share one more tool before we go to the break?
Yeah. Which one?
What's this thing called? Yoink.
Oh, Yoink, right. I also see a question in the show notes too of it does. So Sketch app, I don't think it exports to Photoshop.
Okay, that was a question in the chat from Mushin Girl.
Oh, nice. Okay, it wasn't. I need to open the chat. So yeah, so Yoink. This was one of those things. If you work on a Mac desktop, it can be a little fiddly as far as your drag and drop from one app to another, or from files in a folder into an app. So I found it pretty fast to go from Sketch into Yoink, and then Yoink into Sketch.
Okay.
So many silly words there.
Sketch to Yoink and Yoink to Sketch.
Yes.
Okay. So Yoink is what? It's
literally just like a place to drag and drop stuff, and it creates a little tray. As soon as for the config I have on my Mac, once I start dragging something in an application and out of that application, like Finder or some apps like Sketch, it's all of a sudden this tray slides out from Yoink, and then you can just drop stuff on that tray. And then now you can then grab it from that tray back into whatever other app you need. So it can help as far as like window thrashing and because sometimes you tab away and like your windows are the wrong size to you got to make room for this thing, so you can drag it into that thing, and it makes it a lot, like an easy little pattern.
Gotcha.
minor tool for this, but I found it really helpful.
Um, one more question from Mushin Girl in the chat. Regarding this is going back to Harp.js. Can your template that you're building have more complicated HTML, CSS goop like a parallax effect? Can you do like styling in the template that you generate in what kind of file is that? That's a with Jade.
Yeah. All right. Here, maybe I will share my screen. So like this is let's see. Where's my Hangouts here? So screen share. Yeah, I mean, the short answer is yes. The Jade templates here. If I just quickly share that app, I think right now I'm sharing my Microsoft Visual Studio Code window, and we're looking at the tools file, which is so tools.jade will generate a file called tools.html, and then this is like just a simple simple structured a template that's essentially pulling the data from either I'm inserting things in here explicitly, like this section, the top section. I decided I didn't put it in my JSON file, but then those were little repeated the repeated chunks of content that make up the main body of the page are all there, right? So like this is just making a structured page out of the data in my data.json file, which my data.json file looks like this. And then you'll see, main sections of blurbs like tools or talks and workshops, and then you'll just see like, here's a bunch of examples. And so instead of like, writing HTML for all these specific things, if I, again, go over to tools.jade, there's a big list of tools that all happen to come into existence because the template hits this thing. So it creates, this is an actual, like, an HTML block called a section that, so it's, it's using semantic HTML5. And then for project in this, and this is the structure of how do I get at that data sitting in my in data.json. So it's in public.data, right? And then index.tools. So public is what Harp is saying, like this is where you let Harp start to provide data from the sources that Harp is looking for. And then index is a section. So this is like diving through like a folder structure in a way, right? That's a hierarchy. And then tools. And I know that tools is a list of these things. So if I go back to the harp.json, or no, the data.json, boop, 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 I scroll up. So there's tools, that's a folder, but tools is within index, right? And so an index is within this name of the file. So if I go back to tools.jade, there's the name of the file is _data.json, and then index.tools, there's the list. And then if I want to do things like cool styles and parallax effects and whatnot, let me jump up a level here. If I go, so each page is doing a little bit of reuse too, where I don't have all the HTML header and footer managed in tools.jade, but tools.jade inherits an overall structure pattern established in layout.jade. And
so this is the equivalent of your CSS file.
Not yet, almost there.
Oh, okay.
So like, yeah, CSS will come from main.css, right? So that's going to be the actual cascading style sheet that defines the look and feel of all these different things, and where you may want to add things like a parallax scrolling effect if you're doing it in CSS or JavaScript. I happen to go pretty lightweight on the JavaScript in this site. The only JavaScript I really have is currently is what I put in for my Google tracking, which I even put in my HTML comments that show up in the site, this is a little ASCII art, and I do a little celebration for people who are nosing around in the code, and and then I also give this little mention that I'm listening to your implicit feedback with metrics, unless of course you're blocking tracking, which is totally understandable. And then here I am with my little Google and Google Analytics tracking thing. Anyway, but like, let's say I wanted to do like the parallax scrolling effect. I could essentially, I could add a reference to a JavaScript file in the header that's separate, or I could include this JavaScript in the body of every page, and then you just do that with the script. And then like adding script in a Jade template, you have to add this period after it. Otherwise, because it behaves different than blocks of text do normally in Jade. Normally in Jade, you essentially make a block with whatever, right? So this, like, calling things, instead of just saying div everywhere, you can be more semantic about the purpose of that. So instead of div, I made a block called footer, and then in footer, there's an H3, but you always indent within these different sections. So if we looked at the HTML of my site, you would see like, oh, there's an actual footer tag, and then this, etc. But anyway, like, this is I guess I'm doing a little random ad hoc description of Jade, but you would add that stuff in sort of like this overall, like your main layout, and then which could be this part of the job would be handled by this main layout, part of the job would be handled by CSS, and then possibly, depending on how you're doing it, JavaScript. Because the cool parallax scrolling I'm familiar with, I've needed to do in JavaScript. And anyway, long answer to that question.
Well, no, it prompted getting a look at what it looks like to actually do the work in Jade. So, no, that's good. All right. Well, can we spend 60 seconds, Rob, sort of summarizing that whole exercise that we did at the very top of the section, where we were like using a persona to look at what we've got and ask ourselves who do we want coming to this thing, and what do we want them to do? Yeah,
totally. That's a great idea. So
then we'll go to the break.
And then we'll go to the break. Okay. So let's say it's great to unbox, like, what is your intention for this web presence? If you think of your intention as both is the goals you need, that's helpful, right? So that's going to shape part of like what you're going to put in there and why. But then if you really want to think about accomplishing those goals, you're going to want to consider, like, you want to have some mental model of the people who would be coming to and utilizing this thing you're putting into the world. And a persona, it's like it's a handy design tool that doesn't have to be like a lot of times you can caught up in demographics of like, oh, I think I want to design this for Gen Z or millennials or whatever, right? And you get in, and you start thinking of like attributes of a person that don't necessarily give you the best design constraints. What is a useful design constraint is thinking about a person who has a goal, and you can think of their goal as like a way to shape your inform your design of like, am I helping someone get there or not? And so you can think of a persona as these buckets of behaviors and goals, where okay, and they don't have to be overly precise. You can just as long as you're grouping them and you create these considerations, like Jerzy came up with an interesting one through that role playing of like, well, I'm a person who's curious about collaborating with someone on a small game project, and I it seemed like that as Jerzy was enacting that exercise, he was like, well, there's a lot of scrolling here, and doing some like think out loud protocol about like, for my interests, my needs, and my intention, like this is working well or not. And that's perfect. Like, so like think each persona you come up with could be like, let's see, like, let's see, what's a female name that begins with a G?
Gina.
Gina. There you go. So Gina, the game producer. Okay. So Gina,
Gloria, the game producer.
Gloria, the game producer. There you go.
That has alliteration.
There you go. Gloria, the game producer, is her intent is to find a collaborator on a small game project, and wants to find that information as quick as possible and have that be the main impression of what she finds. She's not as interested in like multidiscipline stuff and whatever. Oh, interesting. So now I can think of that as like, how can I improve things? So, and then if you add a few other personas of like, well, you've got Gina, the game producer, and then maybe there's the, Carl, the agile collaborator, right? And then that person is looking more at, let's see, facilitation, exercise, and experience. But in maybe they're interested in more of the philosophy and saying like, well, if you're going to have someone into to sort of teach and provide examples and do some leading things, you got to have a point of view, right? So if I don't see like what you're about, then I can't. Anyway, so you can think of like, again, each of these groups of behaviors and goals, give them a little personality. That's a persona. And then you use that persona as a filter to look at your design and say like, is this working for that person or not?
Which I would argue should be a skill set that most of us have some practice in. If we've done any kind of fiction making and making characters, we have made personas.
Totally totally a skill that writers, I think, build just by doing their craft.
Yep. That
perspective taking is pretty useful.
Well, cool. What are we going to do next after the break? What's coming up?
Well, I was thinking we could get a little more abstract and start thinking about more about the whys and maybe some of the parts that like how it can be kind of difficult doing self-referential storytelling.
Yeah. Yes. All right. That sounds good. Okay. Yeah, I think that sounds great. We'll do that in about 1 minute and 30 seconds. But before we do that, we have to thank some people who make this show possible. Those folks happen to be the people who support us on Patreon. Patreon.com/leanintoart is the site where you can support us for as little as $1 a month. It's a way to say, I believe in Rob and Jerzy. I believe in the work that they do. I want to make this show more sustainable. So here is a monthly pledge of whatever you can afford. And we want to thank 5 people who have been doing exactly that. First up is D. Jusan. You can find D on Twitter at DEEJUUSAN. Fabulous cartoonist, amazing talent. Speaking of which, Brandon Dayton is on the list this week. You can find Brandon on Twitter at Brandon Dayton. Has a great YouTube channel. Has a new graphic novel coming out in September. Then there's Mark Falk. You can find Mark Falk on Twitter at Radimere, RADIMERE. Thank you, Mark, for believing in us. And Jesse Kaufman, friend of the show. You can find Jesse on Twitter at Jesse, Jesse, Kaufman, KAUFFMAN. And finally, Merjem. Thank you, Merjem, for supporting the show and believing in us. And you can find Merjem on Twitter at MYRJAMVDV. And these will all be linked to the show notes. And if you want to join them, you go to patreon.com/leanintoart, where you will find all the shows we produce, as well as the extra leans, the shows we record only for patrons. And those posts become an open mic post where you can talk about whatever you want, a safe place where only other leaners are hanging out. We thank everybody who has been supporting us at patreon.com/leanintoart. It means a lot to us.
Yeah, it really does. Thank you.
All right. Time to go 10,000 feet up, get a little abstract.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's see what I got.
What music?
Let's see what I got for music. I lost some of my sound bank, but I'll dig into some old ones from... Here we go. A little tentative dancing. Do I want to dance to this one? I don't know.
All right. I think I'm feeling it.
That was from when John David Garrow was on the show.
Oh wow, yeah. I keep thinking I need to get a YouTube playlist of the wrestler music one of these
That'd be
days.
fun.
Yeah.
I need to constantly be cycling different music through my soundboard is what it boils down to. But okay, now we're 10,000 feet up.
And honestly, deep respect to the Macho Man, but it's no, it doesn't have the hook of the Dragon Ball, you know.
It's a little gentler in
That
terms of.
yeah, I mean it's yeah, oh sure. It's very gentle. It sounds breakfast cereal-ish, right? As far as a jingle from the 80s or whatnot, but like and it doesn't like I think the Dragon Ball song would animate my corpse. It just boom pulls me, you know, just like here we go. So
Well,
anyway.
now you just guaranteed that I'm going to push for that. It should the unthinkable happen, you go before me. I will.
Wake
I'll have
up,
to lean in
get
and
up.
say like, put this music on, and now wait for it. I'm back.
Yes, let's go. Yeah, get into it. Anyway, maybe that's a slight exaggeration. But
and
yes.
maybe that's a little morbid, but
I asked for it. So, yeah. Well, speaking of morbidity, there's yeah, self-referential content.
Speaking of morbidity. Yeah, you want to talk about getting lost in the weeds? Try telling a story about yourself. I don't know how people who do memoir do it.
Oh my gosh, I think it is it's a specialization. Where and it must take a lot of practice to get comfortable at it. Because in general, I thought I was going to be done with my portfolio maybe second week in July. And no, it took the entire month of you know, it was a side project, full and proper, got lots of my attention in, you know, nights and evenings and stuff, right? And I was like, oh my gosh, this thing is still going on. And in part, it was like finding that aboutness. I don't know. Some stories it might be a little bit hard to find the aboutness. Because again, I mentioned in the earlier section that part of my intent was to really add like a personal little more of me, a little more of my point of view, instead of like, this is a book report of a history of events of stuff I got paid to do, and also things I do on the side, right? That paints some of a picture, but like, I'm like, no, I want to go further. I want it to stand for a little bit more of what I really believe and care about with these kind of things that I do. In a way, it's like a portfolio version sort of the coat of arms that I've had, where it's that the coat of my creative coat of arms, as far as how I want to engage in trade, right? Where it's like, I seek to do what I love for a community I care about, using tools and methods I believe in to engage in a sustainable trade. So each of those four elements being more explained and brought to some kind of approachable life. And that was the trap right there. It's like, well, because how can you have like a strong, clear personal point of view that's approachable and consumable, you know, pretty efficiently? That took a bit. It took drafts, multiple drafts.
And come to think of it, stating your coat of arms in a way that is clear and has your personal information in it, meaning that it's got like personal examples of like what exactly you mean when you say community I care about, tools that I how did it go? Tools that I
so I seek to do what I love, for a community I care about, using tools and methods I believe in to engage in sustainable trade. Yeah.
So what does that mean when you say tools and methods I believe in? What specific tools? Right, that specific personal biographical data. That kind of makes a statement of that is separate from past or future, right? It's kind of like it
Mm,
helps, it contextualizes what you've done, but it also like plants the seed in the recipient's imagination as to where it could go in the future, what you could do and where you plan to go with that, right?
yeah. I mean, it also, yeah, it gives signals a little bit of how I believe in working, and a little bit more of why, but from the
Mhm.
perspective of like, it's like what you use, caring about what you use shows some signal toward caring about the outcomes you want to reach.
I was just having a discussion with somebody recently about how um, somebody knowing what it's like working with you is kind of as almost as important as the quality of the work. Well, it's probably equal footing, but it's like part
Mhm.
of a larger rubric or larger Venn diagram, right? Because I was talking about how like I got gigs in the past where I was slowly building to the trust of the other person I wound up working with through little tiny collaborations, and finally it was like, okay, you're ready to do a big collaboration, and now there's like no guesswork for me because I know what it's like working with you, right? And it also sounds like you're kind of doing that in your portfolio as well, is letting them know what kind of partner you are.
Exactly. Because in a way, it's saying that these are the kind of things that I'm asking of myself and people I seek to collaborate with, in some ways, being at least curious to work in this style. And that's and no, and it's meant to be like a filter, to not a severe one, but an approachable one where it's like, oh yeah, um I'm looking for this or that. I'm essentially like the kind of signals I'm sending in this. It's literally, I'm like, I'm a design leader. Like this is,
Mm.
and I want to provide a credible perspective and set of signals that reinforce that, and allow you to evaluate. You go ahead if you're so inclined. And that's a different thing than, and I would think the nature of the portfolio changes at maybe different stages of your career and the kind of work you're looking for and whatnot.
Mhm.
Um, and I thought, yeah, taking more of that, uh, you know, that clear, approachable, personal perspective. It's interesting and challenging because I find some designers are really good at it, but I don't necessarily totally agree with how they go about it, and or like elements of their message, right? And so I got stuck at a variety of times, and that helped. You know, that's one of the reasons why I wanted to make sure I was working in a tool I could share the document with and get others' reaction,
Mm.
because um, um, and so I went through a few stages, right, where through the discomfort, you just keep writing, keep writing, keep writing, keep writing, and also, if you've journaled about this before, which I have plenty, like go mine it, like go spelunking through your own past writing, and then do some fresh writing, right? And then uh, and I think getting that far enough where it's like, wow, like here's the heuristic I tried to work with there was like, write enough, write way past, because I was uncomfortable for like all through it, and I don't know, that just says a lot about I mean, my own personal weakness or challenge related to talking about myself. And and so, I mean, and one would think, well, that's pretty wild. I'm pretty sure, excuse me, Mr. Rob Stenzinger, you have hundreds of hours of podcasts and stuff. This seems like a silly circumstance, and well, I assure you, it's nonetheless, here we are. Um, and But what I tried to reach, that threshold, that where I was like, okay, I can stop writing now, was uh, it was about those sections that related to the goals. I knew I wanted an introduction that sort of was the umbrella. I knew I wanted to mention just some statement about then my tools, the talks and workshops, and then the work examples. And like those intro sections each had a separate job, but like some reinforcing signal or whatever. So I'm like, well, I gotta make sure I've got content for all those sections, and that it was that it seemed, even if I allowed myself to be rambly here, I didn't have to be concise to start with, but I wanted to, make a pitch and tell a story. This is why that, this section exists, and, why I'm, how I'm presenting it to you and all that. And I felt like if I conveyed that, then it's like, well, now it's probably to a point where I can get some feedback on it. And so that was kind of like the second wave. And it's like, there's hopefully diamonds in this rough, hopefully. But even if there's not, then I get to know how I failed to reach my goals. And then I can use that as like the fresh criteria of like, okay, each of these sections, scrap and or evolve. And that happened actually a lot with that first section, especially because it had the biggest, I guess I felt the greatest pressure with that section, what I do, what I believe about design, and why this calls to me. And what's super funny is like, there's this technique of writing that ever since, I think I heard Keen Sue mention this, where I think he was working on a story and he had it in like a different genre and everything. But then he took the same story and then like the bones and the skeleton, like so much of the story still translated, but like by switching it up for a different audience. Right. And then like through that, like the key aboutness was there. So honestly, I let myself in my rough drafts, I let myself be, do things that I wouldn't put in a normal document, like be grumpy and preachy and stuff. Right. Where I'm like, gosh darn it, where am I? Like, it's like, where are you going to take a stance for like the stuff you believe in related to your disciplines and your art. Right. Mm-hmm. And then I got some distance from it. And honestly, what super helped me get over that hump was, I did a bit of a design. Well, my wife, Kate Shield Stenzinger, she did a little bit of a design thinking exercise with me where it's like, she interviewed me and I reacted to her questions, and I'm like, and my reactions were just it was raw. Right. And I'm like, this is not ready for like, all right, print it, but it was directional. And it was like climbing through this the process and keeping at it. And I was like, there's a signal in this interview that if I look at what I've produced so far, it's like, all right, I'm on to something. Now it's about my normal voice and putting that into this, where it's like, mm-hmm. It's more it's the advocacy and inclusive language stuff. I'm like, and once I had that, I was pretty close, and there was just a little bit more refinement.
That's interesting. It reminds me of a story that Dan Mishkin likes to tell of when he was working on Amethyst Princess of Gem World, a comic for 12-year-old girls back in the early 80s. The artist, Ernie Colon, would take Dan's and Gary Cohn's plot breakdowns and do layouts of the pages, and he would like pencil in dialogue for the characters. So the dialogue and balloon spotting didn't get done until after the layouts were done. And apparently Ernie would put truly filthy and heinous dialogue all throughout the book, and this was kind of impish play to keep the job interesting, And Dan said the thing that he liked about it was that often this like rated R dialogue would reveal interesting ideas about the characters that wound up getting filtered through Dan and Gary and making it into the book, right? There's something about that raw sort of playful spirit in the way Ernie collaborated with them that helped reveal things that they weren't thinking about before because they were filtering.
That's the thing. It's like, if it's like you have to, I had to trick myself to get past my own filter. And cause like trying to refine the presentation of a message that doesn't have enough purpose and really deep belief imbued in it, you can't add that later. I wasn't able to add that later.
Mm-hmm.
And like, I don't know, I didn't get, it's not like I was like, say, like super foul or whatever, but it was gruff.
Right.
It
Yeah.
was like, it was like every sentence ended with like, this is what I believe. Dang it. Right.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
And yeah. And that's, was really directionally useful though, to get over that clarity.
That that phrasing is so good. Like I'm just personally grabbing onto that, and I think I'm gonna have to hang on to that like a mantra. Is trick myself to get past my own filter because I'm so used to employing it all the time that I wonder how my next mini comic script will go if I write it as angrily and as forcefully as I like my first draft. Right? Is like has all like because I've had moments in my studio where I'm literally screaming at the screen because I'm so angry about something that I believe in, and then somebody's like trying to compromise me on that, right?
Mm.
Um, but the world never gets to see that. But like there's truth in that emotion right there, right? There's something in there that like goes all the way down to my bones. Um, ooh, that feels like playing with the dark side of the force, though, Rob.
It's so uncomfortable, but I think it can be used constructively.
You're just trying to get me to go into that Cobra Kai dojo, and I am not going there.
Johnny's working on putting his life back together. He's having a hard road. It's
For our 7-part series about the new Cobra Kai show, follow us or join our Patreon where we'll talk about it on Extra Lean. Okay.
Honestly, I'd be up for that. More Cobra Kai thoughts.
Okay.
All right.
We'll review the show
I have
again.
rewatched it.
I need to. Okay. Well, so you were mentioning that you had a session with Kate. Did you talk about what she like some of her response to what you were saying was?
Yeah, so there was a few stages of it, to be honest. So like her earlier feedback was immensely helpful because she was like, "Well, why don't you, approach it like one of your workshops?" So it's almost like each section of the site was like a little teaching exercise in a way, but it meant to be experiential and not just what's the word? It begins with a D. Anyway,
Didactic.
Yeah. So how can I do that? I was like, oh, that's awesome. And then that got me through part of the hump, right? So, but then it was that second wave of doing the interviews and getting, like getting help to trick myself to get past my filter. And then it's like, yep, this is deeper belief. And it's raw and unshareable like that. And I don't know, like that was a natural thing that was organic at the time, but now I also intend to use that on purpose in future creative endeavors.
I like that idea about like framing it up like a workshop. I mean, I don't know how much of our audience or how many of the leaners have actually tried to like lead a workshop in the past, but like the thing that the reframing that happens the moment you think about creating an experience where you are going to teach somebody how to do something. Immediately, if you're doing your job, you start thinking of personas. Like, okay, what's the worldview of somebody who's showing up and who's never done this before? What's their age? What's their background? Is it a fifth grader who's had lots and lots of art training? They're taking this class because their parents have supported their interest in the arts. Well, I'm not going to have much difficulty ramping them up to getting them to draw. But tomorrow night, as a matter of fact, I'm leading a workshop at the Art Center called Date Night, where like the premise is that people, like adults on a date, go to this art center and they learn how to do like a arts activity. And we're test driving this idea of doing a comics date night. So I'm going to be dealing with adults who may or may not have, they may have self-selected as I'm not an artist anymore, or maybe they've selected as I wanted to be an artist, I didn't pursue art, or I've been dabbling with this for years, but have never taken it seriously. I'd like to see if I can go a little bit further with it. How do I create an experience and language that reaches all those different points of view? And how do I get them to where I think they need to be in order to enjoy the experience rather than get them to a level of expertise, right?
That is such a a useful framing. It's a finding a service-minded approach to conveying the material. And the conveyance is not a transaction, it's an experience. And then the
Right, right.
experiences have different there, you have people with different styles and interests and preferences and cultures. And how do you provide this an experience that works for
Right.
for those different groups?
And if anybody, we're going to talk about leanintowart.com/workshop shortly, but if you haven't been in either mine or nor Rob's workshop room before, there's at least those videos you can try out to see. But like one of the things that we don't do is we don't stand up in front of the room and say, okay, here are like the 5 principles that if you must follow in order to do this thing correctly. Right? This is the right way and this is the wrong way. And I mean, there always are in certain respects, right and wrong ways, but that's not our approach. Our approach is to investigate and demonstrate thinking exercises and explore principle through example rather than through edict, right?
Mm.
And like that's, gosh, that is such a Kate is so insightful because that is such a great way to think about restructuring my portfolio. Rather than I am an artist with this many years experience who has worked for all these different publishing houses and I know how to do a comic book for you. Who am I trying to serve? I'm trying to serve people who are trying to create memorable and positively affecting stories for young people. Right?
Yeah, that's so. Go ahead.
Oh well, and then the next question is like, what kind of problems are they facing? How can I be of an assistance to that? How can I get them? How can I bring them over? How do I say? How can I be of service to them so that I can be an ally to that person, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm not just a resource, and I'm not just a client. I'm not just a a contractual worker, but I'm actually a partner for this person.
Exactly. Getting to that's seems to be some that like a useful aboutness. Like, and does your current portfolio convey these ideas?
Right. Yep. That is really great triangulation for thinking how I need to update my portfolio.
So, yeah, that's yeah, getting someone to look at your stuff and help you get out of your own head is pretty darn powerful. So, but then I don't know, maybe in a way, I'd be curious to hear from the leaners as far as like what resonates from this. What other questions come up, and like how does this help in in your circumstance?
Well, okay. We can do that as a general call because at leanintowart.com there is a contact us, right?
Yes, indeed.
Yes, there's a contact form where people can send us emails and give us permission to read them on the show. But we could also get ready for final thought and take a break. And then the leaners who are watching live will have about a minute and 30 seconds or so to think of anything that they want to throw at us as a final thought about portfolios, portfolio sites, anything that I would say, like, what do you find to be the most challenging thing right now about updating your portfolio? What do you think?
I like it. Let's see. So yeah, we'll work on. We can explore that, and would love to react to the chat room as well.
And we'll simultaneously come up with our own potential final thoughts just in case. But all right, break time. One more time. We're going to take about a minute 30, maybe 2 minutes on the outside, depending on how wordy we get, to thank some other people who make this show possible. Those people happen to be me and you, Rob. We make this show possible, and we make stuff. I'm a cartoonist and teaching artist, which is to say a person who makes graphic novels and then teaches people how to make graphic novels. And the graphic novel I hope you'll check out, actually, it's not a graphic novel. It's a comics documentary. It's called Science Comics Rockets, Defying Gravity from First Second Books. You can read more about it at sciencecomicsrockets.com. That's easy to remember. It's part of the Science Comics series from First Second, where it's nonfiction comics that teach you about different scientific subjects. And in the case of rockets, my wife Ann and I came up with a book that is the history and science of rockets as told by the animals who participated in rocket history. So yes, almost all the animals in the book, there's a couple animals who are there as a gag, but almost all the animals in the book were directly involved in rocket history, like bears who are used to test ejector seat technology, like rats who were used to show off how powerful rockets were because they were so powerful they could lift up a whole bunch of rats into the sky. But they all landed safely. Tortoises that flew in rockets, quails that went up to the International Space Station, spiders that went up to Space Lab. Space Lab? Sky Lab. Oh my gosh. And, it's available in bookstores everywhere, and it's full color. It's great for kids, but it's also fun for adults to read as well, because when was the last time you thought about Newton's laws of motion? And it's demonstrated beautifully by a rooster, a duck, and a sheep, and Sir Isaac Newton in an ice cream parlor. You can find out more about it at sciencecomicsrockets.com. Rob, you made a game.
I do, yeah, and it's called This Panda Needs You. So, let's say you have a young one who is looking for, a fun, calm activity, or maybe you're looking for a fun, calm activity that's like a puzzle game. Well, This Panda needs you to help out with these blocks and color matching shape patterns of essentially stacks of blocks that actually, when this little panda is wandering through a bamboo forest and encounters them, the solution is right there. They're all solved. But a cloud comes along and blows some wind and they go flying all over the place. And now you have, it's up to you to help this little panda put things back to the way they should be. And, the difficulty ramps up very slow, and it's very, very easy. And the little panda, like, the game knows when you're making progress, and the panda celebrates your work as you go. And then, does a little dance once you solve it, and then moves along. And then there's like over 50 puzzles built into the game to explore. And you can learn more about it at this-panda.com. It's available for iPhone and iPad, Android phones and tablets, and Mac and Windows desktops. So search for it in your favorite app store for your tablets and phones. And then for the desktop, go to itch.io and look for This Panda Needs You.
And if you do purchase it on any of those platforms, a great way you can help. First of all, thank you for doing that. That's awesome of you that you did that. Secondly, if you could give it a review, that helps more people discover it as well. And it helps build more trust for the people who are thinking, maybe I do want to buy this. Wow, all these people said nice things. I mean, when was the last time you bought something online without reading a whole bunch of reviews about it, right? So
yeah, it helps.
But supposing you're here because you just like the way we think about things and you don't care as much about the stuff we make, fair enough. There's more examples of the ways we think about things at leanintoart.com/workshops, where you can download self-contained videos at a price of your choosing, even free. If you do get value out of it, a really nice thing you could do is purchase it for a friend, and then that's like giving us a tip, and you're helping a buddy out. That's pretty cool. And I know that there are people who still haven't gone there, because every couple weeks I get another handful of downloads of the Comics Fundamentals and FATAM sound design workshop. So if you haven't checked them out, please go to leanintoart.com/workshops. If you're watching this video on YouTube right now, giving it a thumbs up helps more people find the show. If you really enjoy the show and you haven't subscribed yet to the channel, please subscribe. If you are listening to the show on a podcatcher like iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Android Podcasts, giving the show a 5-star review helps more people find it there as well. And we thank everybody who has been doing exactly those things. It means a lot to us.
Mm-hmm. Very much. Thank you.
All right. I don't see anything in the chat, and I know it's time shifted a little bit, but it can't be so time shifted that 2 minutes, 2 minutes was can't be delayed by that much. So it's on us. What do you have for final thought on portfolios?
All right. So, like you mentioned, what are you facing that's difficult? I mean, I think there's a lot about this. This is like this. It's a marketing endeavor that I know that for my side projects, and I don't necessarily allocate enough time for some of those supporting type of activities. I'm typically reacting. It's like, so if there's something to update with a game in like an app store situation, right? I have an OmniFocus task that reminds me to check more frequently, because you can come up with some things where it's like, oh yeah, the tech you used to build this app, well, we no longer allow something about the platform, nothing that was in my code, but I need to rebuild and redeploy a game, whatever. But like those maintenance activities, or keeping up well, keeping up ad campaign type stuff, which am interested in trying to get better at. But like portfolio falls into the cracks of like it's not generating a new product, and
it's not directly generating a new product, right? That's the part that's frustrating because like it definitely is something. I just got a comment from somebody about like how difficult it was to figure out how to contact me. And I look at my websites and I'm like, yeah, I don't have my email address anywhere on there. Partially by design, but partially I don't have like a contact button on my website, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, and I've got like this landing page that tells you about my workshops and what my fees are and stuff. But it's like, how do they reach me? Um, Little things like that generates more leads, that generates more interest. And if I want to make this thing more sustainable, then that that's a pretty big important part of it that just is so abstract, right?
It's like once you get it depends on how much you've bought into it and how much you practice it, as far as is it that abstract. Like I can appreciate that I can appreciate the tangibility of it, like making it, when you put something into the world, making it easy to do the thing that you know, accomplishes the goals that you're for why you're doing it, and especially if you're doing it in a service way, the goals of the people who come to you. It's like I know this, but like there's always this deficit of tasks in my side projects of like adding that next layer of refinement and whatnot, especially in the supporting mechanisms, the marketing, and then the the landing pages for a project, stuff like that. That's so it's like allocating time to do it, I think, is a giant pain point. And then keeping at it. And like the best I have as far as my portfolio is that I think I've been in a roughly 2-year pattern so far, and not by design, but something I just get really concerned every couple of years where I'm like, this thing's like, if it's a year old, I'm like, it's close enough. It's not that out of date. Oh, I see some flaws and there's some things and whatever, take some notes, journal, whatever, file it away. But 2 years, I'm like, nope, it's crossed the line. And I can't even explain why I feel that way. But my feelings get strong enough where I'm like, all right, I'm allocating time, going for it. Got to roll up my sleeves. This has to happen.
Yeah.
There's a new question in the chat, and I'm curious about your thoughts too, Jerzy, about
Is there
pain points. Yeah.
pain points? Oh,
Yeah, to the whole
how web stuff is Greek to me, but super beneficial to hear you guys talk about. Well, thank you, David Grom. Yeah, web stuff. So, I mean, the good news is that Rob was showing some very elegant and very lightweight yet robust ways to do this. But to tell you the truth, my portfolio, rather like my landing page, is probably going to be on a Blogger site, right? Right now, my personal, landing site is a blogger. It's jdrose.com, and then I have a jdrose.net Tumblr a site, which those are both like what you see is what you get, or WYSIWYG. Like it's like doing a blog post on WordPress, or even as simple as Facebook nowadays, right? But the principles what Rob was talking about in terms of thinking in terms of an outline, like outlining it in Google Docs and letting friends react to it, and then figuring out how to arrange that. That part, I think, is useful whether or not you know how to use fancy web coding tools.
Yeah, your content and the strategy is something that's totally independent of how you actually implement. And yeah, that you can carry that with you. It doesn't have to, you don't have to jump into one of the myriad of ways you could actually code it yourself. I mean, there's always like Squarespace sites and free options like Tumblr and Blogger. Those are really good.
And they're fairly straightforward and easy to use. I mean, I believe it's like right in the layout panel in Blogger, you can set a single page to be your landing page instead of running it like a blog, right? So
oh, nice.
If I'm not mistaken, I believe that's still there. Let's see, maybe now don't quote me. I shouldn't have said it out loud.
But well, your point, it's directional though. There are a variety of free tools, and your mileage will vary based on that platform, keeping some feature or not. But then you can use that to hunt and find the platform that works for you. Actually, come to think of it, GitHub is another place that you can publish a site for free using their GitHub Pages technique. And you can use it's not WYSIWYG, but you don't have to go deep into coding. You can essentially use Markdown, which is a pretty lightweight way to express like a structured document in text that can turn into HTML or other stuff, but in this case, HTML. And they have some good guides and stuff too. So yeah, I think it's at pages.github.com, something like that.
Very cool. So yeah, there's a ton of options, thankfully, nowadays.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the only thing I would say is the easiest advice is that you just get your own URL so that you can move it to whatever site you want to. So you always have that. So you're not, if your portfolio is at like yourname.wordpress.com, well, that becomes a drag. That's one of the reasons I'm still on Blogspot, is because Google still says, oh, this is the canonical place to find Jerzy is at jerzydroz.blogspot.com. So, which resolves to jdroz.com. So,
yeah, definitely.
Maybe in a future episode we could talk about doing, what is it, a 503 redirect, 303 redirect?
What is it called now? I thought it was like was it 301? I'm forgetting. So those are
permanent redirect.
Yeah, those are all HTTP headers, and like you have your 200 is like that's when the web browser has what you asked for, or the web server has what you asked for. But like a 404, of course, is like, I didn't find it, and then you get an error page.
Oh, the good old days.
Yeah.
Remember 404 errors? Yeah, it's happening all the time.
Totally. Good times.
Yeah, I think we did a podcast, Rob.
I think we did. Yeah, that was a fun exploration. Thank you, Jerzy.
All right. Well, we record this show every Thursday at 10 p.m. Eastern, 9 p.m. Central. This show is streamed live on YouTube and then collected as a podcast at patreon.com/leanintoart. We will be back soon with more thinking hard about visual storytelling. Until then, I have been Jerzy Droz of leanintoart.com and Jerzy Droz on Instagram.
And I have been Rob Stenzinger of leanintoart.com and Rob Stenzinger on Instagram.
Oh. I guess there's nothing left to say except, okay, bye.
Show notes for this episode can be found at leanintoart.com. You can also follow us on Twitter at the user leanintoart, and just via email at leanintoart@gmail.com. And remember, leaners aren't wieners. Thanks for listening.
All right, I'm going to shut off the stream. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, thank you.
Guys, next time.